Greetings, everyone. This is Rock and Roll Spot Connection with the weekly comic book roundup, and we're gonna get started with this week's X-Men books and Avengers titles. Kicking things off with X-Men: God Loves, Man Kills Extended Cut #2. Where we left off, Professor Xavier, Cyclops, and Storm had been seemingly killed by the Purifiers. However, an investigation of the crime scene by Wolverine basically showed that they had not been killed. Magneto had come to aid the X-Men and against the Purifiers as well, having discovered their handiwork elsewhere. Also, members of the Purifiers had managed to kidnap Illyana Rasputin and Kitty Pryde. And so we begin. Xavier is being seemingly tortured by his students. Nightcrawler had seemingly bites him on the neck like a vampire. Shadowcat pulls out his heart. Wolverine slashes at his stomach. Storm electrocutes him. Cyclops seemingly fires his optic blasts at him. And a hand reaches out in friendship. But we discover this is all basically brainwashing that Xavier is being put through by William Stryker. And he's not that, he's still fighting it. We also learn that everything's set up, the devices that Storm and Cyclops are being kept in are torturing them and basically broadcasting their pain to Xavier. But he's being made to think that it's his own pain. Or rather, it's being done to him by them, And so, we get Stryker's story. Apparently, he was in the military, Army Ranger. When his tour was over, he and his wife, Marcy, who was pregnant, were headed to Phoenix to visit his family. They ended up in a car accident. And Marcy gave birth to what is described by Stryker as a monster. Stryker killed the baby, and then when his wife came to, he snapped her neck, dragged the bodies of the child and his wife to their car. The gas tank was leaking. Got in next to her, climbed in beside her, and lit a match. Seemingly, the explosion of the car threw him free. And Stryker turned to drink. Explaining he was a warrior with a Class A record. So, up to a point, the Army turned a blind eye to his drinking and fighting, and suffered a terrible loss. But their patience only lasted so long. Then he saw a magazine article about mutants by Charles Xavier. And he finally realized just what it was, that monster that came out of his wife was a mutant. And he figured surely this was punishment for some sin of his wife's. And he founded the Stryker Crusade. Cyclops asks how he learns of the X-Men. Stryker explains that when Xavier founded them, It was under the auspices of the federal government. His liaison was an FBI agent named Fred Duncan. A senior official at the Bureau, a devoted member of the Crusade, passed copies of Duncan's files on to Stryker, which convinced Stryker more and more that Xavier was the Antichrist. The Purifiers that have Kitty and Magic in custody call Stryker and ask what to do about Kitty. And Stryker tells them to kill her. And so, Colson Street in the South Bronx, Purifiers take the unconscious Ileana out of the car and then fire at the trunk of their car, only to discover that Shadowcat got out. And their field leader tells the rest of the Purifiers to fan out and cut off escape routes and shoot her on sight. Kitty is making her way, however, through Bronx, and she does run upon some unsavory types who offer to help her. Kind of, we'll do something nice for you, you do something nice for us. But Anne is caught up with her. And the distraction of the six guys is enough to allow Kitty to escape, though. And while Anne does take a knife to the shoulder, she does take down her assailants. Kitty manages to escape, makes her way to a bodega, calls the school, and shortly after Nightcrawler picks up, the bodega is destroyed, but she managed to phase out of it. Gets to the L train and basically does her walk on air routine to get into the train as it's leaving. She explains to the transit authority officer what's going on when the Purifiers attack and shoot the officer, telling the other passengers on the train if they stand aside they won't get hurt. It's the girl they want. However, the X-Men have arrived and save her, along with Magneto. And in fact, Magneto pulls the bullet out of the transit authority officer's body as it's steel jacketed. So, the officer's taken to the hospital while the X-Men make their way towards Stryker's headquarters to stop Stryker's plan. Back at Stryker's headquarters, the brainwashing of Xavier continues, and he ends up using his telepathy to kill Cyclops and the Storm. The doctor who's been overseeing the brainwashing is kidnapped by Shadowcat and Nightcrawler, who are not, let's just say, they're less willing to take shit than normally. The Stryker building, the supposed corpses of Cyclops and Storm are being taken to the incinerator while Ileana is being taken elsewhere. However, in the elevator, instead of heading down to the basement as it's supposed to, it's moving up as Magneto is ripping it through the building. Anne escapes, and on top of the World Trade Center, they learn that no matter how deeply controlled he was, no matter how brainwashed Xavier may have been, he still couldn't bring himself to truly kill Storm and Cyclops. they'll likely need a jolt of electricity, but their metabolic functions have been basically not so much bottomed out, but and with thanks to a jolt of electricity, they survive. Intelligence is shared. It turns out that night, Stryker is to have a massive broadcast from Madison Square Garden. And there's a news reporter outside, basically expositing, but for exposition sake. And he explains that a growing number of religious leaders, including fundamentalist evangelical ministers, who only a short while ago were Stryker's friends and allies, have begun to question the direction of the crusade. As they have noted, it's one thing to criticize government policy and the moral state of the nation, quite another to single out a specific group of people and brand them as literally less than human. As it does, and making it clear that it does sound an awful lot like a little man in Germany back in the late 30s. Backstage at the Garden, Stryker explains to Xavier what he plans to do. Basically, use a modified version of Cerebro to reach every mutant mind on the planet at once and kill them. And then arrives at the Garden, tells Stryker that the bodies of Cyclops and Storm have been taken, as well as Colossus' sister. Furthermore, the Doctor has disappeared as well. However, Stryker trusts in his faith in the Lord to protect him. So he begins giving his sermon. The crowd's eating it up. And a switch is thrown. The X-Men are incapacitated, as well as a young boy on the street who begins bleeding from his ears and nose. Nightcrawler teleports back up. He too is also bleeding from his ears and nose. However, Magneto arrives at the Garden, pulling the roof off to gain entrance. However, a senator in the audience does note that it's kind of odd that, rather than destroy, just make just attack the building, Magneto pulled the roof off and then replaced it. He was making an entrance, not an attack. And so, an attack is made against Magneto, knocking his helmet off. Also, one of the senator who noted that Magneto was making an entrance and not an attack, has apparently also started bleeding from his ears. The police officers in attendance are trying to calm everything down, while the X-Men have made it they're going after the back. And Anne has suddenly noticed something. She's bleeding as well. Marking her as a mutant, leading Stryker to push her off the stage. She lands on the ground, dying of a snapped neck. Magneto begins to challenge Stryker's word, and some of the crowd are not too keen on what he has to say. However, The NYPD does make a point of, the security guards present do make a point of getting between the parishioners and Magneto. Backstage, the X-Men managed to free Xavier from the cherries in which he's controlling everything, and then Cyclops is able to destroy the machine. And then the X-Men say their piece. Stryker points at Nightcrawler. During Cyclops' speech, and states, "You dare call that thing human?" To which Kitty states that Nightcrawler's more human than Stryker, explaining that he's generous, kind, and decent. He's had every reason to be bitter, refused to become as much of a demon inside and out. But he decided he'd rather learn to laugh. And Stryker pulls a pistol, points it at Kitty, and says those her blasphemous words can be her epitaph. A shot rings out, hitting Stryker in the chest. Shot fired by one of the NYPD officers in the audience. Later, turns out that Stryker has been arraigned on charges arising from his recent activities, and a group of his supporters who call themselves the Purifier, as well as the activities of the Purifiers. Stryker denounced the indictment as religious persecution and predicted the eventual vindication of himself and his crusade. And Magneto kind of says, okay, yeah, we had it. Okay, so that was a Pyrrhic victory. Maybe it's time for us to truly join forces. But the X-Men disagree. And Magneto asks if Xavier will stick with his students or join him, and Xavier can't. He molded the X-Men into the people willing to stick by his dream, and he's not. And if it's his dream that they're going to stick with, then he's going to stick with them. And then he leaves. And the main story comes to its close while Kate, we pick up with the bookend portion set in the aftermath of X-Men Black Magneto, with Kate talking to the young girl that Magneto befriended in Texas. However, Kate gives the girl a hat with the call sign of her mother. And then, however, Kitty has to go as one of the ONE's new Sentinels shows up, who is rather doesn't seem to care about the fact that she's grabbing a child by the shirt and saying, "Hey, there was mutiny here. Where'd they go?" The girl's father comes out and tells the ONE officer to get her hands off of his daughter. And she tells the rest of her team that the mutant can't have gotten far. Keep an eye out before flying off. opining in the end that if our lives, our struggles matter at all, they have to be defined by hope. And that is where the issue ends. Interesting. Interesting. It's interesting to finally read this. I've known of the story for years, and like I said, it was in part the basis for X-Men 2. But it's neat to see the change, the way it was originally done. Anyways, moving on to Hellions, number 3. So, the Hellions had arrived at Mr. Sinister's clone farm, only to discover that Madeline Pryor was there as well and had woken up the clones and of the Marauders and turned said clones against the Hellions. And, well, yeah, first off, upon entering, Empath got shot in the face by Scalp Hunter because, well, yeah. Because he was messing with everyone's minds. And the rest of the team did not fare too well against the Marauders, with the Scalp Hunter, John Greycrow, being taken prisoner, and Havoc being brought to Madeline, while Psylocke and Wildchild would defend for themselves, with Wildchild going a bit more feral and seeing that since Psylocke, the leader, or Alpha, was injured, well, he was going to challenge her for leadership. So the issue begins. Madeline has removed Havoc's mouth and then recounts her past. And while Alex tries to dispute things, she tells him to hush, and he eventually finds a shard of glass and cuts his mouth back open, and decides to tell her a story about a boy who wanted the woman his brother had, who promised he'd give her everything that his brother couldn't, and the boy learned she really was his brother the whole time, and who's beyond sick of hearing her talk about him. Apparently, that got rather charming to Madeline, and she promptly leaps into Alex's arms. Meanwhile, picking back up with Psylocke and Wildchild, the two of them have their fight. She hits him with her psychic blade, basically unleashing just the lower function. So now it's just the lower functions. Back with the Marauders, Greycrow, and Alex. Alex asks, why her slaves don't just eat Greycrow. And she explains that she wants them to work for their food. Marauders are busy torturing Nanny and Orphan Maker. And it's explained that she gives them the curse. They will always hunger, no matter how much they eat. Explaining that they forgot about her, and people pretending she doesn't exist is her least favorite thing. And so, Madeline summons forth Arclight and tells her to remove her hand and eat it. As she begins cutting into her hand, Greycrow mentions that he remembers Madeline. And while he's explaining why he remembers her, she gags him and reminds him that Greycrow shot her in the head and stole her baby. She goes on to add that Sinister made them like the way they are in the lab, sending him to kill her, knowing that that she would send other hims to kill him. She decides, yeah, they all have to die in pain, and then everyone else sees that she's a real girl. And so, back with Psylocke and Wildchild, their fight continues. Only now it's come down to skill versus, well, the basically skill versus instinct. Psylocke manages to break one of Wildchild's arms, then his leg, and then his neck. Giving him some time to heal. We then get a slight prose portion. It kind of comes off as being from Beast, but I could be mistaken as to who it's by. It's entitled, "That Time We Gave a Team to a Hand Assassin." Apologies for the dramatic title, but I think it wise, as with all of Mr. Sinister's Hellions, to examine Psylocke's membership on the team with clear eyes. Scott thinks adding her as a mediating force is a stroke of genius, but Sinister's mawkish protestations to the idea were stunningly transparent. Good luck feigning surprise when it's revealed it was his plan all along. So yes, Sinister has a measure of control over Psylocke, or plans to. But what concerns me, and what Sinister almost certainly underestimates, not that I don't have the utmost faith in his faculties, is the bond between warriors at war. Sinister is ostensibly the leader of this ragtag group. But after a few missions, whom will they want to follow? The flamboyant clown who's pulling their strings for his amusement, or the dyed-in-the-wool assassin who's bled for them in battle? We all showed Professor X due reverence in our younger days, but when the big robots with laser palms came, it was Scott we followed. All I'm asking is that we keep a watchful eye as Psylocke's influence over her compatriots grows. We must remind ourselves that she is not Betsy. There is much we don't know, and what we do, while not cause for alarm, is certainly a reason for caution. Yes, I'm talking about how she was raised from youth by a mystical ninja murder cult. There is no world where Psylocke has found herself under Sinister's thumb unless it serves her in some way. I'm sure she knows the puppet's strings also bind the puppeteer. As Sinister discovers this, will I want to point and laugh? Of course, I'm only mutant. But not after Krakoa burns behind my back. It feels like something Beast would say, so, yeah. Back with Madeline and Alex, she explains her grand plan. They built a home for all mutants, all except her, and she's hurt. And of course, no one will see through all the blood and horror, but she's hurt. And so she explains what she's going to do is take all the clones that are there at the clone farm and flood the Krakoan gates. She goes on to add that the lucky will drown in the blood of the murdered and the seeping remains of the island, and she will leave a footprint in mutant blood and soil that will fossilize, scarring this cursed epoch. And then only fools will argue that she never existed. However, for Scott gets Alex's head. Arclight's making her way towards beginning to chow down on Greycrow. Meanwhile, it seems Scrambler and Blockbuster may have made some progress in getting through Orphan Maker's armor. Well, they finally managed to get through, but some corrosive shoots out and then splashes all over Scrambler's face. As Danny tries to tell a story about how there once was a boy named Peter who loves his mommy very much, but one day as Peter fed a great fever, well, yeah, Blockbuster goes after her. Arclight actually apologizes to Greycrow for trying to kill her. What's about to happen, and he explains that apologizing isn't like her, and tells her to do what she's going to do. as she stabs him. Back with Psylocke and Wildchild. Wildchild is healed from a broken neck. Thanks Psylocke, and explains that knowing who's in charge calms his mind. And so she tells him that, says to him that if he's healed, they have a mess to clean. That is where the issue ends. Which brings us to X Factor number 2. Where we left off, Krakoa's new X Factor investigations had discovered the fate of Aurora, returning her body to the Five, and learning that she had been killed. And they also decided to stick together and set up with the blessing of the Quiet Council and the Five, they would basically investigate missing mutants. Kind of, if someone's missing for so long, well, then they will go and investigate. If anything, to make sure whether someone's just simply been kidnapped or worse. So we begin in Krakoa. Hooded figure suddenly arrives on the island with a box. Passing by the Five, then by transit to the Boneyard, where the package is left. The package has been marked X Factor. The next morning, Aurora shows up at the Boneyard, seeing the package. Before she can even knock on the door, Northstar sees that she's alive, comes after her, gives her a hug. Well, she told she didn't have to get a housewarming gift for Esther. She said that it was just waiting there when she showed up. Prodigy and Dakin have a little snip at each other, with Dakin asking if Prodigy's mutation is being a huge nerd, and him explaining that it kind of is, and then Prodigy retorting by asking if Dakins is being a huge slut. And he kind of thinks for them, kinda, yeah. He then promptly introduces himself to Aurora. However, it appears there was something alive in the box. It appears to be goggles with some odd brandings on them. Brandings no one recognizes, even Prodigy, which is rather concerning. Turns out the sponsorship logos all come from Mojoverse. They have to sign up for Headshot TV. And so it said that, okay, they get uniforms. Aurora decides she'll stay at the Boneyard, and so Rachel asks if she'll keep an eye on Amazing Baby. She doesn't entirely feel comfortable bringing a werewolf to Mojoverse. So the team arrives in Mojoverse, or all Mojo World, which does have its own gate. And getting to lay the land. Meanwhile, Amazing Baby starts giving Aurora the grand tour, commenting that Since her death, it seems that her brother bravely assumed the mantle of being the crazy Bobier twin. Which, amazing baby, apparently, in a patronizing manner, confirms. We then get an ad for the Headshot TV app for Mojoverse. Who gets in? Who gets a chance to win? Now you decide with viewer voting now available for every Mojo World entry request audition. Download our official Headshot TV app to live stream auditions of aspiring visitors, greenlight candidates you like, or downvote anyone you'd feel uncomfortable stepping foot inside Mojo World. We trust our viewers to protect Mojo World or decide who has content potential, so we're leaving it all up to you. Use our app to exercise your rights as Mojo World's new border patrol. And so we get the interviews. People aren't entirely sure what to think of Polaris. Is she Magneto's daughter? Is she not? North Star, yeah. Everyone does seem to like Prodigy. Dakin offs to flash the camera. Rachel is entirely silent, and iBoy has definitely been approved. So those who've been approved are but yeah. So Dakin's heading back to Earth. For the primary purpose of keeping, as he puts it, North Star's sexy shut-in sister company. And apparently since at the Boneyard they've got the Headshot app, Aurora sees this and asks herself out loud if she's disassociating, but also thinks to herself that Dakin thinks she's sexy. Ha! However, they can't go too much further as they don't yet have a sponsor. However, a sponsor soon arrives in the form of Mojo. But he's able to... the conversation between X Factor and Mojo does not go all that well, especially with the fact of Polaris using her powers to pick up Mojo, turn him upside down. And North Star being, North Star. Rachel sends iBoy out to check the buildings for clues with his X-ray vision, while Prodigy decides he's going to see what he can learn from within a spiral body mod shop. Then, of course, Mojo's threatening him with his army. Prestige makes quick work with them. He's not happy about this. And it turns out there are 5 channels on the top 5 Mojoverse live streams on Headshot are well compensated for their streams. One of those very clearly related to Spiral. The rest, we just get logos, not names. We then learn that the top 5 members live in a gated studio community about 3 blocks ahead. However, as they head to it, Polaris and North Star promptly have their powers nullified. And, they're not happy. Back at the Boneyard, Aurora's enjoying a bowl of popcorn watching things unfold in the Mojoverse when North Star's husband Kyle returns. Of course, happy to see his sister-in-law alive. And then he notices that his husband's on TV in another dimension. And so Aurora just kind of pats the couches, you know, yes, the Boneyard gets Mojoverse channels. You know, basically, sit down and watch. I've got popcorn. And that is where the issue ends. And so far, yeah, I'm digging this. It definitely has a similar feel to Peter David's X Factor Investigations run, which I absolutely adore. And so, yeah. Anyway, moving on to this week's Avengers-related titles, which are really just Iron Man-related, but not the point. Iron Man's an Avenger, that counts. Starting off with Force Wars 2020, number 3. So, much like Hawkeye Freefall and Ant-Man last few weeks, Force Wars 2020 was actually a book that I didn't think we were going to be seeing a physical copy of the last issue for. But where we left off, yeah, turns out Ultimo is on the island as well as Force Works, and so is MODOK. Yay! Oh, and an army of Deathlocks too. So, MODOK explains his big plan. He's made some modifications to Rhodey's armor so that Rhodey can use the arc reactor to damage Ultimo. Also, it turns out that Quake can summon Ultimo, kinda, sorta, because with her seismic powers. So she does just that. Ultimo shows up, along with the army of MODOKs. So, they go to enact a plan. Most members of the Force was largely just fighting off the Deathlocks, while War Machine gets close enough to use his the now modified armor to, well, destroy Ultimo's head. And it's also drained the armor. However, it turns out there's, of course, a plan within the plan. Turns out MODOK's entire plan was to destroy Ultimo's head so he can take control of MODOK himself. Which he does, and probably renames himself Ultimodok. So, the team get Rhodey back in the bunker. And they begin working on another plan. Rhodey figures that, problem is, most of the plans a lot of the plans they've come up with or have already are basically kind of built around killing the island. So, Rhodey managed to at least somewhat recharge his arc reactor. And so, after doing that, War Machine flies out, catching MODOK's attention. However, Rhodey's not in the armor. Also, Mockingbird's going through the computer database to get the various files that MODOK's got there when the Deathlock army shows up. So Rhodey takes over with the files while U.S. Agent and Mockingbird deal with the Deathlocks. And they do at least manage to figure out that there's a central processor in the command unit. They're about to slave to him, kind of, stop the command unit, stop the rest of them. So, Agent uses his shield to cut off the command unit's head. But it doesn't stop the army. Also, it's revealed that, obviously, Quake is inside War Machine armor, and what little power it's got isn't gonna cut them. Isn't gonna do it. MODOK discovers this ruse, and so she opts to open up a chasm on the island, drop MODOK into it. And so Rhodey has now taken over the Deathlock army and sends the Deathlock swarm against MODOK. With seemingly all of them falling to their deaths. With, however, Rhodey has kind of gone native a bit, but they do manage to save him. The next day at a secure government medical facility, Maria Hill is basically dressing down the team and pretty much firing all of them. Especially seeing as how, now she's got to call off the scrub team so that they don't destroy the files before the files be retrieved. However, U.S. Agent explains that, no need to call the scrub team. Here are MODOK's Deathlock plans. Thing is, Mockingbird doesn't really think that anyone, not even Maria Hill, should have those. But yet, she does end up firing the rest of the team. The members part ways, with Quake pushing Rhodes in his wheelchair because he's recovering from having Deathlock tech implanted in him. And Mockingbird and US Agent have a brief moment after Hill's gone. Because she's fairly certain there was no way that both of them could have downloaded the files onto a thumb drive. So maybe what the thumb drive that was given that US Agent gave Maria Hill was blank, so the scrub team would, scrub the island. But he says, hey, it's not my fault, I don't know how this tech stuff works, I'm just a dumb grunt. And so everyone parts ways, and that is where the issue ends. Which brings us to Iron Man 2020, number 6. The conclusion of the Iron Man 2020 arc, though there's still one single issue that the shop didn't get enough copies of because, somehow they got screwed on that one. So the second issue of Wolverine 2020 will be next week, hopefully. So where we left off, Tony Stark had made himself a new body. I realized he is that he is Tony Stark, and he'd also created a new holographic armor and gone after Arno Stark, and it seemed he was winning. Things seemed to be actually in hand, and him and the Robot Revolution were actually managing to stop Arno Stark. And then the Extinction Event entity comes along. And so Tony, shocked that this thing's real, finds that he can, maybe I've damaged the God Killer armor, but I'm really great at fixing things, especially armor. And so he offers to help Arno. There's a hull breach, and so Iron Man, Arno rescue their various machine their various other machine counterparts. Go to stop the Extinction Event entity, pushing it into the idea being to push it into the atmosphere so that to at least do some damage, but have the atmosphere's friction burn it up. On Earth, Sunset Bane leads the charge. Sunset Bane leads the charge against the massive tendrils. Practically everyone there. Quake's there, Mockingbird's there, a bunch of Nick Fury LMDs are there. Nick Fury LMDs, Black Panther, Spider-Man, Albert and LCD, U.S. Agent, Wasp, gang's all there. Not to mention Captain Marvel leading a team of Avengers to also assault the Dead-On, including Thor, Vision, and Ironheart. Looks also like Wonder Man is pulling up the rear. Rhodey's commanding an Ultimo mech. Dr. Bong is commanding an Iron mech, and then Controller is under control and taking care of the Extinction Event entity. And then Arno goes in, zaps Tony, explains, I'm the one that's got to do this. And he flies into the entity's mouth, explaining that he's a paradox. A human needs more AI at heart. An AI cursed with human ego and frailty. The God Killer was never a suit of armor. It was the man. It was him. And the entity explodes. Tony catches Arno in the air. Arno apologizes to him. Hey, I had to do this. This is all part. I kind of screwed up. Can you forgive me? Of course he can. However, it turns out that the Extinction Event entity, not really there. Just a holographic ruse that Tony came up with. And he's since placed Arno's mind into the E-scape in a force field that is basically a new version of the Iron Lung. He further explains that the creature everyone saw doesn't exist, at least not for them. It was Arno's personal extinction event, the disease he was born with. Thought he'd been cured, but he'd only debated the symptoms. It was still going to kill him by the end of the year. And he kept eating at his mind, and there was no way to convince him he was wrong before he took mental control of everyone on Earth, so he had to play into the delusion and give him the happy ending that the real world couldn't. The holographic armor, the virtual realm that used to be the E-scape, is now Arno's world and his life support system. And he'll continue to survive and thrive within. The AI versions of Tony and Arno's parents I think it's monstrous. And so Tony asks, would it be better if he knew the truth? He did a new version of the Iron Lung that made his childhood a living hell. Arno is a genius, and Friday can't keep the whole thing going forever, and he'll realize he's in a simulation. Unless he isn't alone. Unless people who know him better than anyone, like his parents, are in there too, helping him shape that reality. And so Howard says, well, maybe they download themselves in there. They could give him a life where he's fulfilled his destiny, where he's a hero who saved the world and can now just be happy. And Maria says that would actually be a new start for them too. They could be the family that always should have been. And so they do just that. Later in Washington, Sunset Bane is appearing before Congress and basically saying the whole thing was all a plan of hers. Basically, the robot rampage target limited, the hack of the E-scape, and all the collateral damage are her doing. And the robot resistance strings were pulled by her. It was a thing of beauty. Genius, all designed to make Banetronics a world power. But what's the point of pulling off the ultimate plan if no one knows you did it? So she confesses, says to lock her up, but entered in the congressional record that she won. At the robot bar known as Young County Valley, Jocasta and Machine Man are watching, commenting, and, well, yeah. At Stark Unlimited, Rhodey's given a new, basically, a reformed body that gets rid of his anxiety about being in the armor. So they'll be back to being War Machine soon enough. Janet Van Dyne is actually kind of curious as to whether or not her relationship with Tony was a minor deviation of things or something else. So what happens next? And he's asked. He says he has no idea what's coming next, but he's looking forward to finding out. It's also explained that the machine used to regenerate Tony and Rhodey's bodies can only work once per person. Later on, rebuilding Stark Industries, well, Tony explains that even with Sunset's confession, Stark Limited has too much baggage to be viable, so he's giving Dr. Bong the keys to the chocolate factory. And it's now Bong Robotics. I think it's robotics. And so Bong asks what Tony's going to do. He says he's done with 2020. He doesn't live in the now. He's the Iron Man of the future. And that is where the issue ends. I would say this is where the Iron Man 2020 arc ends, but like I said, we still, technically it is, but we still got I Wolverine 2020. And that's it for now. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Links to my Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, PayPal can be found in the description box down below. This is Rock and Roll Spock signing off, saying, live long and rock hard.